translation of Sahih Bukhari, Book 15, The Two Festivals. Eids. Volume 2, Book 15, Number 69. Narrated Abdullah bin Umar. Umar bought a silk cloak from the market, took it to Allah's Apostle and said, "O Allah's Apostle, take it and adorn yourself with it during the Eid and when the delegations visit you." Allah's Apostle, peace be upon him, replied, "This dress is for those who have no share in the hereafter." After a long period, Allah's Apostle, peace be upon him, sent to Umar a cloak of silk brocade. Umar came to Allah's Apostle, peace be upon him, with the cloak and said, "O Allah's Apostle, you said that this dress was for those who had no share in the hereafter. Yet you have sent me this cloak." Allah's Apostle said to him, "Sell it and fulfill your needs by it." Number 70, narrated Aisha. Allah's Apostle, peace be upon him, came to my house while two girls were singing beside me the songs of Bi'ath, a story about the war between the two tribes of the Ansar, the Khazraj and the Aus. Before Islam, the Prophet, peace be upon him, lay down and turned his face to the other side. Then Abu Bakr came and spoke to me harshly, saying, "Musical instruments of Satan near the Prophet, peace be upon him?" Allah's Apostle turned his face towards him and said, "Leave them." When Abu Bakr became inattentive, I signaled to those girls to go out and they left. It was the day of Eid, and the black people were playing with shields and spears. So either I requested the Prophet, peace be upon him, or he asked me whether I would like to see the display. I replied in the affirmative. Then the Prophet made me stand behind him and my cheek was touching his cheek and he was saying, "Carry on, O Bani Arfida," till I got tired. The Prophet asked me, "Are you satisfied? Is that sufficient for you?" I replied in the affirmative and he told me to leave. Number 71, narrated Al-Bara. I heard the Prophet, peace be upon him, delivering a khutbah saying, "The first thing to be done on this day, first day of Eid al-Adha, is to pray. And after returning from the prayer we slaughter our sacrifices in the name of Allah, and whoever does so, he acted according to our Sunnah traditions." Number 72. Narrated Aisha. Abu Bakr came to my house while two small Ansari girls were singing beside me the stories of the Ansar concerning the day of Bi'ath. And they were not singers. Abu Bakr said protestingly, "Musical instruments of Satan in the house of Allah's Apostle." It happened on the Eid day and Allah's Apostle said, "O Abu Bakr, there is an Eid for every nation and this is our Eid." Number 73, narrated Anas bin Malik. Allah's Apostle never proceeded for the prayer on the day of Eid al-Fitr unless he had eaten some dates. Anas also narrated, the Prophet used to eat odd number of dates. Number 74, narrated Anas. The Prophet said, "Whoever slaughtered his sacrifice before the Eid prayer, should slaughter again." A man stood up and said, "This is the day on which one has desire for meat," and he mentioned something about his neighbors. It seemed that the Prophet I believed him. Then the same man added, "I have a young she-goat which is dearer to me than the meat of two sheep." The Prophet permitted him to slaughter it as a sacrifice. I do not know whether that permission was valid only for him or for others as well. Number 75, narrated Al-Bara bin Azib. The Prophet delivered the khutbah after offering the prayer on the day of Nahar and said, "Whoever offers the prayer like us and slaughters like us, then his nusuk, sacrifice, will be accepted by Allah. And whoever slaughters his sacrifice before the Eid prayer, then he has not done the sacrifice." Abi Burda bin Nir, the uncle of Al-Bara, said, "O Allah's Apostle, I have slaughtered my sheep before the Eid prayer and I thought today is a day of eating and drinking not alcoholic drinks, and I liked that my sheep should be the first to be slaughtered in my house. So slaughtered my sheep and took my food before coming for the prayer." The Prophet said, "The sheep which you have slaughtered is just mutton, not a nusuk." He Abu Burda said, "O Allah's Apostle, I have a young she-goat which is dearer to me than two sheep. Will that be sufficient as a nusuk on my behalf?" The Prophet, peace be upon him, said, "Yes, it will be sufficient for you, but it will not be sufficient as a nusuk for anyone else after you." Number 76, narrated Abu Sa'id al-Khudri. The Prophet used to proceed to the Musalla on the days of Eid al-Fitr and Eid al-Adha. The first thing to begin with was the prayer, and after that he would stand in front of the people and the people would keep sitting in their rows. Then he would preach to them, advise them and give them orders, that is khutbah, and after that if he wished to send an army for an expedition, he would do so. Or if he wanted to give an order, he would do so, and then depart. The people followed this tradition till I went out with Marwan, the governor of Medina, for the prayer of Eid al-Adha or Eid al-Fitr. When we reached the Musalla, there was a pulpit made by Kathir bin Asalt. Marwan wanted to get up on that pulpit before the prayer. I got hold of his clothes but he pulled them and ascended the pulpit and delivered the khutbah before the prayer. I said to him, "By Allah, you have changed the Prophet's tradition." He replied, "O Abu Sayyid, gone is that which you know." I said, "By Allah, what I know is better than what I do not know." Marwan said, "People do not sit to listen to our khutbah after the prayer, so I delivered the khutbah before the prayer." Number 77, narrated Abdullah bin Umar, Allah's apostle used to offer the prayer of Eid al-Adha and Eid al-Fitr and then deliver the khutbah after the prayer. Number 78, narrated Ibn Jurayj, Atta said, Jabir bin Abdullah said, the Prophet went out on the day of Eid al-Fitr and offered the prayer before delivering the khutbah. Atta told me that during the early days of Ibn Zubair, Ibn Abbas had sent a message to him telling him that the adhan for the Eid prayer was never pronounced in the lifetime of Allah's apostle and the khutbah used to be delivered after the prayer. Atta told me that Ibn Abbas and Jabir bin Abdullah had said, "Where was no adhan for the prayer of Eid al-Fitr and Eid al-Adha?" Atta said, "I heard Jabir bin Abdullah saying, the Prophet stood up and started with the prayer, and after it he delivered the khutbah. When the Prophet of Allah peace be upon him finished the khutbah, he went to the women and preached to them, while he was leaning on Bilal's hand. Bilal was spreading his garment and the ladies were putting alms in it. I said to Atta, do you think it incumbent upon an imam to go to the women and preach to them after finishing the prayer and khutbah? Atta said, no doubt it is incumbent on imams to do so, and why should they not do so? Number 79, narrated Ibn Abbas, I offered the Eid prayer with Allah's apostle, Abu Bakr, Umar and Uthman and all of them offered the prayer before delivering the khutbah. Number 80, narrated Ibn Umar, Allah's apostle, Abu Bakr and Umar used to offer the two Eid prayers before delivering the khutbah. Number 81, narrated Ibn Abbas, the Prophet offered a 2-rakat prayer on the day of Eid al-Fitr and he did not pray before or after it. Then he went towards women along with Bilal and ordered them to pay alms and so they started giving their earrings and necklaces in charity. Number 82 narrated Al-Bara bin Azib, the Prophet peace be upon him said, the first thing that we should do on this day of ours is to pray and then return to slaughter the sacrifice. So anyone who does so, he acted according to our Sunnah tradition, and whoever slaughtered the sacrifice before the prayer, it was just meat which he presented to his family and would not be considered as nusuk. A person from the Ansar named Abu Burda bin Niyar said, O Allah's apostle, I slaughtered the nusuk before the prayer but have a young she-goat which is better than an older sheep. The Prophet I said, sacrifice it in lieu of the first, but it will be not sufficient as a sacrifice for anybody else after you. Number 83, narrated Said bin Jubair, I was with Ibn Umar when a spearhead pierced the sole of his foot and his foot stuck to the paddle of the saddle and I got down and pulled his foot out, and that happened in Mina. Al-Hajjaj got the news and came to inquire about his health and said, Alas! If we could only know the man who wounded you. Ibn Umar said, You are the one who wounded me. Al-Hajjaj said, How is that? Ibn Umar said, You have allowed the arms to be carried on a day on which nobody used to carry them and you allowed arms to be carried in the haram even though it was not allowed before. Number 84, narrated Said bin Amr bin Said bin Al-As, Al-Hajjaj went to Ibn Umar while I was present there. Al-Hajjaj asked Ibn Umar, How are you? Ibn Umar replied, I am all right. Al-Hajjaj asked, Who wounded you? Ibn Umar replied, The person who allowed arms to be carried on the day on which it was forbidden to carry them. He meant Al-Hajjaj. Number 85, narrated Al-Bara the Prophet delivered the khutbah on the day of Nahar Eid al-Adha and said, The first thing we should do on this day of ours is to pray and then return and slaughter our sacrifices, so anyone who does so he acted according to our sunnah and whoever slaughtered before the prayer then it was just meat that he offered to his family and would not be considered as a sacrifice in any way. my uncle Abu Burda bin Niyar got up and said, "O Allah's Apostle, I slaughtered the sacrifice before the prayer but have a young she-goat which is better than an older sheep." The Prophet said, "Slaughter it in lieu of the first, and such a goat will not be considered as a sacrifice for anybody else after you." Number 86, narrated Ibn Abbas, the Prophet said, "No good deeds done on other days are superior to those done on these first 10 days of Dhul-Hijjah." Then some companions of the Prophet said, "Not even jihad?" He replied, "Not even jihad, except that of a man who does it by putting himself and his property in danger for Allah's sake and does not return with any of those things." Volume 2, Book 15, Number 87, narrated Muhammad bin Abi Bakr al-Thaqafi, "While we were going from Mina to Arafat, I asked Anas bin Malik about talbiyah, 'How did you used to say talbiyah in the company of the Prophet?' Anas said, 'People used to say talbiyah and their saying was not objected to, and they used to say takbir and that was not objected to either.'" Number 88, narrated Umayyah, "We used to be ordered to come out on the day of it and even bring out the virgin girls from their houses and menstruating women so that they might stand behind the men and say takbir along with them and invoke Allah along with them and hope for the blessings of the day and for purification from sins." Number 89, narrated Ibn Umar, "On the day of Eid al-Fitr and Eid al-Adha a spear used to be planted in front of the Prophet as a sutra for the prayer and then he would pray." Number 90, narrated Ibn Umar, "The Prophet used to proceed to the musalla and an anaza used to be carried before him and planted in the musalla in front of him and he would pray facing it as a sutra." Number 91, narrated Muhammad, Umayyah said, "Our Prophet ordered us to come out on a day with the mature girls and the virgins staying in seclusion." Hafsa narrated the above-mentioned hadith and added, "The mature girls or virgins staying in seclusion but the menstruating women had to keep away from the musalla." Number 92, narrated Ibn Abbas, "I in my boyhood went out with the Prophet on the day of Eid al-Fitr or Eid al-Adha. The Prophet prayed and then delivered the khutbah and then went towards the women, preached and advised them and ordered them to give alms." Number 93, narrated Al-Bara, "The Prophet went towards al-Baqi, the graveyard at Medina, on the day of Eid al-Adha and offered a 2-rakat prayer of Eid al-Adha and then faced us and said, 'On this day of ours, our first act of worship is the offering of prayer and then we will return and slaughter the sacrifice, and whoever does this concords with our sunnah. And whoever slaughtered his sacrifice before that is before the prayer, then that was a thing which he prepared earlier for his family and it would not be considered as a nusuk, that is sacrifice.' A man stood up and said, 'O Allah's Apostle, I slaughtered the animal before the prayer but have a young she-goat which is better than an older sheep.' The Prophet, peace be upon him, said to him, 'Slaughter it. But a similar sacrifice will not be sufficient for anybody else after you.'" Number 94, narrated Abdurrahman bin Abbas, Ibn Abbas was asked whether he had joined the Prophet in the Eid prayer. He said, "Yes. And I could not have joined him had I not been young." The Prophet came out till he reached the mark which was near the house of Kathir bin Asalt, offered the prayer, delivered the khutbah and then went towards the women. Bilal was accompanying him. He preached to them and advised them and ordered them to give alms. I saw the women putting their ornaments with their outstretched hands into Bilal's garment. Then the Prophet along with Bilal returned home. Number 95, narrated Ibn Jurayj, Atta told me that he had heard Jabir bin Abdullah saying, "The Prophet stood up to offer the prayer of the Eid al-Fitr. He first offered the prayer and then delivered the khutbah. After finishing it he got down from the pulpit and went towards the women and advised them while he was leaning on Bilal's hand. Bilal was spreading out his garment where the women were putting their alms. I asked Atta whether it was the zakat of Eid al-Fitr. He said, "No, it was just alms given at that time. Some lady put her finger ring and the others would do the same." I said to Atta, "Do you think that it is incumbent upon the Imam to give advice to the women on a day?" He said, "No doubt, it is incumbent upon the Imams to do so, and why should they not do so?" Al-Hasan bin Muslim told me that Ibn Abbas has said, "I joined the Prophet, Abu Bakr, Umar and Uthman in the Eid al-Fitr prayers. They used to offer the prayer before the khutbah and then they used to deliver the khutbah afterwards." Once the Prophet I came out for the Eid prayer as if I were just observing him waving to the people to sit down. He, then accompanied by Bilal, came crossing the rows till he reached the women. He recited the following verse: O Prophet, when the believing women come to you to take the oath of fealty to you, to the end of the verse. Quran 60 verse 12, after finishing the recitation he said, O ladies, are you fulfilling your covenant? None except one woman said, yes. Hassan did not know who was that woman. The Prophet said, then give alms. Bilal spread his garment and said, keep on giving alms. Let my father and mother sacrifice their lives for you ladies. So the ladies kept on putting their fatkas, big rings and other kinds of rings in Bilal's garment. Abdur Razak said, fatkas is a big ring which used to be worn in the pre-Islamic period of ignorance. Number 96, narrated Ayyub Hafsa bint Sirin said, on Eid we used to forbid our girls to go out for Eid prayer. A lady came and stayed at the palace of Bani Khalaf and I went to her. She said, the husband of my sister took part in 12 holy battles along with the Prophet and my sister was with her husband in 6 of them. My sister said that they used to nurse the sick and treat the wounded. Once she asked, O Allah's Apostle, if a woman has no veil, is there any harm if she does not come out on a day? The Prophet said, her companion should let her share her veil with her, and the woman should participate in the good deeds and in the religious gatherings of the believers. Hafsa added, when Umayyah came, I went to her and asked her, did you hear anything about so-and-so? Umayyah said, yes, let my father be sacrificed for the Prophet peace be upon him, and whenever she mentioned the name of a Prophet she always used to say, let my father be sacrificed for him. He said, virgin mature girls staying off and screened, or said, mature girls and virgins staying off and screened. Ayyub was not sure as which was right, and menstruating women should come out on the Eid day, but the menstruating women should keep away from the Musa. And all the women should participate in the good deeds and in the religious gatherings of the believers. Hafsa said, on that I said to Umayyah, also those who are menstruating? Umayyah replied, yes. Do they not present themselves at Arafat and elsewhere? Number 97, narrated Umayyah, we were ordered to go out for it and also to take along with us the menstruating women, mature girls and virgins staying in seclusion. Ibn said, or mature virgins staying in seclusion, the menstruating women could present themselves at the religious gathering and invocation of Muslims but should keep away from their musalla. Number 98, narrated Ibn Umar, the Prophet peace be upon him used to nahar or slaughter sacrifices at the musalla on Eid al-Adha. Number 99, narrated Al-Bara bin Azib, on the day of Nahar Allah's Apostle delivered the khutbah after the Eid prayer and said, anyone who prayed like us and slaughtered the sacrifice like we did, then he acted according to our Nusuk tradition of sacrificing, and whoever slaughtered the sacrifice before the prayer, then that was just mutton, that is not sacrifice. Abu Burda bin Nayyar stood up and said, O Allah's Apostle, by Allah, I slaughtered my sacrifice before I offered the Eid prayer and thought that today was the day of eating and drinking non-alcoholic drinks, and so I made haste in slaughtering and ate and also fed my family and neighbors. Allah's Apostle said, that was just mutton, not a sacrifice. Then Abu Burda said, I have a young she-goat and no doubt, it is better than 2 sheep. Will that be sufficient as a sacrifice for me? The Prophet replied, yes. But it will not be sufficient for anyone else as a sacrifice, after you. Number 100, narrated Anas bin Malik, Allah's Apostle, offered the prayer on the day of Nahar and then delivered the khutbah and ordered that whoever had slaughtered his sacrifice before the prayer should repeat it, that is, should slaughter another sacrifice. Then a person from the Ansar stood up and said, O Allah's Apostle, because of my neighbors, he described them as being very needy or poor, I slaughtered before the prayer. I have a young she-goat which, in my opinion, is better than 2 sheep. The Prophet gave him the permission for slaughtering it as a sacrifice. Number 101, narrated Jundab, on the day of Nahar the Prophet offered the prayer and delivered the khutbah and then slaughtered the sacrifice and said, anybody who slaughtered his sacrifice before the prayer should slaughter another animal in lieu of it, and the one who has not yet slaughtered should slaughter the sacrifice mentioning Allah's name on it. Number 102, narrated Jabir bin Abdullah, On the day of Eid the Prophet used to return after offering the Eid prayer through a way different from that by which he went. Number 103, narrated Urwa on the authority of Aisha, on the days of Mina, 11th, 12th, and 13th of Dhul-Hijjah, Abu Bakr came to her while two young girls were beating the tambourine and the Prophet was lying covered with his clothes. Abu Bakr scolded them and the Prophet uncovered his face and said to Abu Bakr, "Leave them, for these days are the days of Eid and the days of Mina." Aisha further said, "Once the Prophet was screening me and I was watching the display of black slaves in the mosque and Umar scolded them. The Prophet said, 'Leave them. O Bani Arfida, carry on, you are safe protected.'" Number 104, narrated Ibn Abbas, the Prophet went out and offered a 2-rakat prayer on the day of Eid al-Fitr and did not offer any other prayer before or after it, and at that time Bilal was accompanying him.